Hey, everybody, I'm Mark Zeno here with my big game breakdown in the NBA for Monday, February 26th. We're going to look to New York Knicks shooting guard Dante DiVincenzo to go over 17 and a half points. Now, DiVincenzo has stepped into a larger role since Julius Randle got hurt on January 27th, particularly in scoring. Now, since the Randle injury, his minutes have nearly doubled. He went from averaging around 22 minutes a game prior to the injury to now 38 minutes per game in the month of February. His scoring has jumped up from around 13 points per game in December, 15 points per game in January, up to 22.4 points per game in the month of February. He went around from making 3.5 3-pointers per game prior to the injury, up to 4.5 3-pointers per game in the month of February. Pistons are allowing shooting guards to score 22 points per game, which is in the bottom half of the league. DiVincenzo stayed under this number 3 times in the 10 games since Randle's injuries, but he's averaging 24.7 points per game at home. We know overall how bad the Pistons defense is. We like Dante DiVincenzo to go over 17 and a half points tonight. My best bet for tonight in the NBA, again, a short NBA schedule. We're going to go back to the New York Knicks with them at Madison Square Garden taking on the Detroit Pistons. Now, this is just 2 nights after the Knicks got dismantled on national TV by the Boston Celtics. Look, the Knicks are still an injured team. They're missing Julius Randle. OG Anunoby also not going to play. The Randle effect has really had an issue with the offense. The loss of Randle has changed the offense. They were averaging 115 points per game with Julius Randle. Since the injury, they're only averaging 109. Now, their defense hasn't dropped off much because this is a Knicks team that plays defensive basketball all around. You're not going to play for Thibodeau if you can't play defense. This is also a Knicks team that's 19-9 to the under at Madison Square Garden this season. Pistons offense, bottom 5 in the NBA in offensive efficiency. They're going to struggle against a Knicks team that only gives up 106.9 points per game at home. And the Knicks, who don't play fast at all, period, don't have to push the pace in this one. They're the second slowest tempo team in the NBA, only slightly ahead of the Bulls. And with the Pistons having little success scoring, New York will be able to grind this pace down and take care of the basketball and play smart. Now, the Pistons have gone under in 5 straight. That scares me just a little bit here. But the 3 before the break during this streak were much higher totals in the high 230s, low 240s against bad defensive teams. In the last 8 games, the Pistons have only scored more than 110 against bottom 5 defenses in the league. The Knicks defense, obviously not that. I don't even think Detroit gets to 100 in this game. Jalen Brunson doesn't have to do that much work, doesn't have to carry the load tonight all by himself. We're going to go under 223.5 between the Knicks and Pistons tonight for my best bet. Also, client play over at WagerTalk.com.
Hey, everybody. Today's big game breakdown is going to feature the Raptors and the Pacers, a game that was just played recently, 127, 125, Indiana. That game was played in Toronto. Pascal Siakam, the new Pacer, had a big hand in winning that game. Big bucket with about 19 seconds left in that one. But let's take a look at what's going on here after the break. The Raptors now back with their guards, pushing pace once again. And the Pacers are off a back-to-back last night with Dallas. So the Raptors are certainly going to be encouraged to push pace here once again against Indiana. And Indiana hasn't been good in these back-to-back situations. 10 tries, 2 and 8 against the spread in these back-to-back situations. So certainly favored here. Opener was 6.5, now down to 6, a little bit of Raptor money. And in those 10 Pacer games where they played back-to-back, the point differential is rather large, minus 8.7. They're scoring about 117 a game, giving up about 125 and a half. So it's certainly not good defensively for the Pacers. And again, the way Toronto's been pushing pace, and Emmanuel quickly talked about it a little bit and said that defenses are now beginning to blitz him. And out of that blitz, he's been able to find Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, some of those frontline guys that can score near the rim. He's been able to find them for buckets. He said the offense is going pretty good right now. And the numbers indicate it. I mean, they've been between 121 and 125 in each of their last 3 games as far as scoring is concerned. For the Pacers, the minutes weren't brutal last night for the 5 starters. Each one of those logged somewhere between 29 and 33 minutes. So Rick Carlisle did a pretty good job keeping the Pacers somewhat fresh for this one, if you consider that fresh. And Miles Turner had an interesting quote. The Pacers center had a big game last night, and he talked about the team goal being to get to that number 4 spot in the East. Right now occupied by the New York Knicks, only 1.5 games ahead of the Pacers. The 4 spot obviously gives you home floor. in the opening round of the playoffs, and that's what Turner implied Indiana is after. They're after a home court series. You only have to jump Philadelphia, who's in fifth. They're a half a game ahead of Indiana and banged up currently. We see the results of Philadelphia without Joel Embiid. And of course, like I say, the Knicks are in fourth right now, only a game and a half behind them. And the Knicks are banged up. Who knows when Julius Randle's coming back? Who knows when Anunoby's coming back? So on and so forth. So it's certainly a mindset that you wouldn't want to bet completely against. But I think here you almost have to. Indiana's bad back-to-back stuff, the close loss suffered by Toronto at home certainly burns in their recent memory. The fact that Toronto's been, I think, the number 8 pace team in the NBA over the course of their last 5, they seem to be playing with some sort of passion. And again, for Toronto, it's interesting to note that they too have the goal of getting into a play-in game, only 4 games out of the play-in spot, and that's what they're working for. So Indiana could win this one. Certainly their back-to-back against the spread numbers don't suggest that they'll win this one. They've only covered 20% of the time. But even if they do, 6 looks like a lot in this game. So big game breakdown. We're going to take Toronto plus the 6 against Indiana.
The Detroit Pistons will look to put some shine on the NBA's worst record on Monday night after falling short with 2 straight defeats coming out of the All-Star break. They did, however, play extremely competitively on Saturday against the Orlando Magic, though only falling short through the efforts of that late Paolo Banchero 18-foot jump shot with that follow-up subsequent 3-throw as well in the final seconds of that game. The Pistons, however, shot over 50% from the floor in that matchup, with the 3-point percentage coming in 9% higher than their season average as well. So, there's no question Detroit are shooting the ball well right now overall, especially Cade Cunningham, who shot 4 of 7 from 3-point range on Saturday, as well as leading the Pistons in points, assists, and free throw percentage this season as well. Facing them tonight will be a New York Knicks team on home court, looking to bounce back off a double-digit loss themselves against the Boston Celtics on Saturday as well, with, Boston being absolutely lights out in that game offensively. They hit almost 57% from the floor to own the number 1 shooting percentage in the league based on last game's sample size. New York's numbers were a long way south of that, however, and with double the amount of turnovers that Boston put up in that game as well. It was always going to be a struggle for New York to compete in that one, given how dominant Boston was. The Knicks have, though, generally been more offense-heavy in games after suffering a bad loss in their previous matchup, putting up some absolutely huge numbers back in December after big losses with, 136 points against Toronto, 139 against Phoenix, 129 against Milwaukee, coming off a big loss and so on. And, they could well look to take out those same frustrations once again here tonight against Detroit. So, I lean over tonight in the Detroit Pistons New York Knicks matchup in a game, I likely believe is a few points shy of where it should be. In terms of a best bet, however, I'm going to take a look at the game between the Brooklyn Nets and Memphis Grizzlies tonight in Tennessee. But before I do, just want to mention that the Major League Rugby season kicks off this weekend. Really excited about that, obviously. And we're offering up a special offer over at my page right now that gets you the entire MLR season for only $99. That includes every play in MLR across the season as a whole, as well as every other rugby competition for as long as the season goes on as well. 6 Nations going on right now, European Champions Cup and so on. So make sure and lock that in before the new season kicks off on Saturday. Returning to the best bet, I'm going to take a look at the Brooklyn Nets to cover on the road tonight against the Grizzlies in Memphis. Brooklyn are coming off 4 straight defeats across the last 4 games. They got absolutely hosed by the Minnesota Timberwolves on Saturday as well. But I like this matchup for them tonight on the road going into Memphis. And, I do expect them to win and cover as a result. The Grizzlies just haven't been good at all of late. They own the worst offensive efficiency rating in the entire league this season. And they've actually been a lot worse at home this season as well, averaging a full 1.5% less from the floor at home, 0.8% less from 3-point range as well when compared with their season-long road numbers. And they face a team in Brooklyn tonight that, not only ranks top 10 in extra scoring chances per game this season, but, who also have covered 5 of the last 7 games when going in as a marginal favourite of between 0.5 to 4.5 points as well. So Memphis are on the rocks right now. 2 good wins against Houston and Milwaukee recently, but those were the only 2 victories across any of their last 12 starts. So, question marks there, obviously, and there's still a ton of players out of their lineup as well. Brooklyn could also be in line for some big time shooting regression also tonight. Their numbers have been over 8% off from the floor across recent games from what their season long numbers have been. So happy to take a piece of the Brooklyn Nets tonight to win and cover on the road against the Memphis Grizzlies. Best bet.
Today's best bet here on the NBA card. And I'm going to go back to something that actually has been a thing for the last 2 to 3 years, or for the prior 2 to 3 years, I should say. Hasn't been a thing this year, and that's the New York Knicks first half. I just think this is a situational spot for them. Here they lay 6.5 first half against the Detroit Pistons. Let's take a look at what Detroit's last 4 games look like as far as first half is concerned. The other night, lose the first half by 10, 65 to 55 against Orlando. Before that, lose the first half 72 to 43, lose by 29 against Indiana. Prior to that, lose the first half 70 to 44, lose by 26 to Phoenix. Game before that, lose 71 to 48, lose by 23 in the first half to the Lakers. Those are first half blowouts, all double-digit losses. 3 of the games where they allowed 70 plus, all 4 they allowed 65 plus. The first half just has not been the Pistons thing. 3 of those 4 games, they didn't even make it to 50 points. So the Knicks obviously are not the defensive team that they were prior to injury, but you read some of the quotes out of the Knicks after that loss to Boston the other night. Obviously, Boston, arguably the best team in the NBA, arguably the best offensive team in the NBA. Tough loss for the Knicks. Corrections to be made. And of course, first and foremost, to the defensive side of the ball was head coach Tom Thibodeau, who did not like the way the Knicks allowed 3-pointers, so on and so forth. So as soon as you see stuff like that coming out of Thibodeau's mouth, you instantly believe that the defense will be awake from the opening tip in this particular game. Detroit just does not shoot the ball well. And their starting lineup with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, basically 2 one-on-one basketball players. The front line, not big on scoring here. And the front line is matched by the Knicks in this particular instance. Isaiah Hartenstein and Precious Achiuwa, who's played very well since coming over from Toronto, can negate Jalen Duren. So it's hard to see where Piston points are going to come from. And again, if you look at what they've done in the first half, last 4 games, it hasn't been much offensively. When they go to the bench, the Detroit shooters off the bench now play for the Knicks. Bojan Bogdanovic, New York Knick. Alec Burks, New York Knick. What Detroit comes off the bench with is New York Knick guards who couldn't shoot. Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier. Well, Evan Fournier didn't really play. So bench production when we get into the second quarter kind of favors the Knicks as well. You can go a little bit deeper. Miles McBride, Jericho Sims for rim protection, so on and so forth. Yeah, I could see the Knicks absolutely wanting to get out quick in this game. I just talked about Indiana seeking the Knicks number 4 spot in the NBA standings right now. The Knicks want to maintain that spot, hang on as long as they can until their starters come back. This is a very winnable game against a team that has a tendency to get blown out in the first half. Knicks, for what it's worth, haven't played a lot of these non-playoff type teams over the course of their last 10 games. But when they have, the defensive results have been pretty good. And I'm going to use Philadelphia as an example in this analysis simply because Philadelphia is not the same without Joel Embiid. But against Philadelphia, Knicks hold them to 44% shooting. The Houston Rockets, not a playoff team, the Knicks hold them to 45% shooting. Utah Jazz, 45% shooting. Charlotte Hornets, 46% shooting. Their best defensive efforts have come against these teams that aren't playoff teams. I think we'll see another one here again. 6.5 seems somewhat large if you're just using the profile of the Knicks, which is slow tempo basketball. But I think the defense, if Detroit, if their last 4 games are any indication and they score less than 50 points here, they probably don't get this cover. I think that's the way it's going to go. I think the Knicks probably win the first half by double digits, a little bit motivated and focused. So best bet for today is going to be Knicks first half, -6.5.